Thanks so much for inviting me. And for remembering Roger and all he meant for us, and for getting us to consider how his legacy moves forward. So much has already been said so eloquently that I'm going to cut out a few of the things I was going to say. But I was 22 in 1974 when Judy Perkins took me along to the barn in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and introduced me to Roger and that wonderful world around him. The barn itself was a particularly special and glorious place, as I remember. Just the light coming in the trees, but then all the ideas inside and the wonderful people. Quite a few of them are here. I actually tried to write them down, and then I lost everything on my laptop, so I'm not going to try and do that list again because I'd forget someone important. But I particularly like to mention Payne, who was the sort of wonderful, gentle, soothing background to everything. And there was Roger, boom, boom, ideas, and Katie kept it all going, and it's all online. And yeah, it was a lovely place, and I was really lucky to be invited to work there. And it was all on a bit of a fraud, really, because Roger heard I had an undergraduate degree in mathematics, and he had lots of data which he wanted analyzing. So he thought this fitted well. And my undergraduate degree was in pure mathematics from a university with a very focused view of what an undergraduate should learn. So the only numbers I think I met in my undergraduate degree were 0, 1, and perhaps I. And but I tried, and he got me involved in some wonderful projects, some which were prescient, like we were trying to measure whales from the air, which was quite a new thing in those days. Now everyone's doing it and using the great drones that Daniela was talking about to do it way more accurately than we could have even dreamed of. I worked on other projects which really captured my imagination, the sailing right whales. I'm an absolutely fanatic sailor. The only reason I study whales is because that allows me to go sailing around the ocean. And here I was studying the sailing whales, but that, for some reason, never caught on quite as well as the other ones. I think it should have. And through it all and around us was Roger and his ideas, and in the background was all he was doing. And I only knew bits and pieces. I did know the extraordinary transformation his work was making to human consciousness that Carl just outlines so eloquently. But there was so much more going on that he was involved with that I had no idea. And in fact, some of which I'm just learning today. It's pretty remarkable. So those were great days. And I remember Roger's kids and the smell of ferrets, and the machine for zapping squirrels, which Roger invented. And there's a lovely story there. There was a guy even younger than me working there called Peter Thomas, who later became a big deal in the US government. And Roger had just got his squirrel zapping machine working, and he was really enjoying it. And I remember him passing the controller to Peter and saying, yeah, you want to have a go? And Peter said, and Peter was a quiet young guy. He said, well, Roger, I think I'm sufficiently well in my mind that I don't need to go around zapping squirrels. And Roger thought it was hilarious. It was... Okay, so I'm going to transition into some ideas that I'm working with that follow from some of the things I learned from and with Roger. And these include the fact that he didn't, he was taking ideas and models from all kinds of other species, human music, bird song, owls, and so on, that he was interested across a huge range of scales, temporally and spatially. And for instance, spatially, during those times, he was working with Douglas Webb on the idea that I think, well, somebody mentioned, that finbacks communicated over tens of thousands of kilometers across ocean basins. He was also working on the barnacles, on the callosities of right whales, to Bill Cheville's somewhat unhappiness because of, anyway, I won't go into that one. But first, Roger helped me enormously with my work. When we were given, Jonathan Gordon and I were given some money to go into the Indian Ocean and try and study living sperm whales to show that you didn't need to kill them to learn about them. He was enormously supportive, and I still use, to find sperm whales, a hydrophone system that Roger designed and built and got for me, and we still have it. So he was very instrumental for me. So this last bit is a kind of tribute to Roger and his ideas, and I call it Sperm Whale Clans and Human Societies. In 2002, Luke Rendell and I made our big discovery. It involved the social units of sperm whales, which probably Shane will talk a bit more about. But this is 10 to 12 female sperm whales who live together, usually related. They go around together. They do everything together. And we looked at their vocalizations. And we found that off the Galapagos Islands, where we'd done our work 10, 15 years earlier, there were two different kinds of social units. One who communicated using coders that kind of went click, 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 click. And one which communicated going click, 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 click. So the regular and +1. And kind of like the Canadian A on the end of the, for the +1s. So we found that the +1 social units only socialize, form groups with other +1s, and the regular only with other regular. And even though they were all in the same general area. We then found there were a range of differences in other behavior, how they moved around, how close to the islands they went, their social behavior, and even their reproductive rates between the two clans, as we called them. We found there was no genetic basis for this. They were very similar in their nuclear genes. So this was culture. The young sperm whales were learning from their mom, their female relatives, how we do things. And then other people started looking in other parts of the world and found pairs of clans or more of Japan, of Brazil, of Chile, of Mauritius, and Shane found them in the Eastern Caribbean. And then in a remarkable study published last year, I think, by Taylor Hirsch was the prime author. She got together people who got coda sounds, sperm whale coda sounds from all across the Pacific and put it all together and published this paper. Roger was one of the authors of that paper, as are a few other people in this room. And it's pretty remarkable. She found 7 of these clans across the Pacific. We estimate there are about 20,000 females on average in each clan. And the clans have spatial ranges from about 1,000 kilometers for the +1 one, which we've only heard, or any of the group had only heard off the Galapagos and mainland Ecuador, to 10,000 kilometers for the short clan, click, 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 who have been heard from Japan to Chile, from British Columbia to New Zealand. This is an extraordinary scale, huge scale. And kind of following Roger, we look for parallels. We look for birds, because birds have been a wonderful source of parallels for certainly whale song and other aspects of whale behavior. But there aren't any good ones that I know of for birds. And Taylor picked up on human ethno-linguistic groups. And I'll talk a bit more about the parallels she used later. But earlier this year, I was in my boat off the Galapagos looking for sperm whales, and there were no sperm whales. Well, there were some males, but male sperm whales are pretty dull in my perspective. Anyway, we were sailing around looking for the females, not finding them, and I was reading this wonderful book a friend had given me called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow, which is a new history of humanity, and that it really is. And the basic picture is that what we had assumed about the history of humanity is either extremely simplistic or just plain wrong. And so as I was out there looking for sperm whales, or listening for sperm whales, I started to think about what this told us about what we were trying to do. And, you know, people have been studying humanity's history through archaeology, anthropology, and other fields for a century or centuries. And just a few of us have been looking at sperm whale clans for less than 20 years. So we're way behind, and we've got a lot to learn. So what can we learn from all of this? Well, one is, I think, extreme variability. Human groups are incredibly varied in all kinds of ways. And we're realizing the same is true for the sperm whale clans. So with a maybe 20,000 is the average clan size, but I bet the short clan's way bigger than that, and the +1 is way smaller. And recent work, especially in the Eastern Caribbean by Felicia Vachon and Shane, has shown that things are really different there. The scales are much smaller. The whales move really differently. And that even the way the clans seem to be marked is different. So in the Pacific, the clans seem to have a particular motif. And my favorite is the palindrome clan, whose codas sound the same forwards and backwards. In contrast, in the Caribbean, the two clans, EC1 and EC2, have a particular coda. Each has a particular coda, so that people like Shane and my grad students can listen just for a few minutes and they know which clan it is. And even I can sometimes tell after an hour or so. And so it seems a really different way of marking the clans in these two different oceans. And then that brings up that things may be really different in different parts of the world, and that can give us a great clue as to what's going on. Now, Shane is working on a worldwide collaboration of bringing the codas together. So not just the Pacific, like Taylor did, but everywhere. And this, to me, is one of the most exciting things that's going to happen in the next little while. And then if you think about how we looked at humanity's history and how much we drew from the idea, we almost have a replicate of what happened in Africa and Eurasia and what happened in the Americas, because there was almost no connection between them by humans until recently. You have the same with the sperm whales. The female sperm whales in the Pacific aren't going to get to the Atlantic and vice versa. And at least the genetic evidence suggests they haven't for a long, long time. And then we have the extraordinary case of the Mediterranean, a basically isolated group of sperm whales, which to me is Australia for humans, right? Humans got there and they were kind of stuck there. And different things happened. And those different things tell us about a lot. Other things we can learn are that Graeber and Wengrow point out that the idea that agriculture changed everything is actually wrong. You get all kinds of different social systems which sometimes the same pre and post agriculture and so on. So agriculture is important, but it's not changing everything. Similarly with the sperm whale clans, I don't expect to find some, oh, these eat big squid, these eat small squid kind of thing. And the preliminary evidence that Marianne Marcoux did on stable isotopes suggests that's true. And then there's this wonderful word they introduced to me, schismogenesis. Now, Taylor Hirsch, when she was in her work, she used the idea that symbolic marking is really important for humans to test in sperm whales. And it had been proposed that that is one of those human things that only us do. And she found evidence that the clans which were closer together had less similar codas of the kind that identify clans than the clans which never really met each other. And that is what you expect from symbolic marking. But schismogenesis, it goes much further. It's really neat. It's the idea that individuals in one group deliberately change their behavior to be different from the other group. So these guys eat that. We are not going to eat that. But in I guess, the most profound example, the indigenous people of California, who had a nice democratic sort of egalitarian way of life, may have partially had that to contrast themselves against their neighbors to the north, the northwest coast peoples, who did not have that kind. They had slaves, they had strong hierarchies and all the rest. And so the two societies are deliberately adopting different kinds of behaviors to be different from one another. And I wonder if, when we follow the regular group around the Galapagos, it's really hard because they wiggle here and there, whereas the plus ones go woof. And whether any of that is, well, we don't behave like them. We go and check out every nook and cranny. I don't know. Well, finally, I think I'll just mention gender. So another of the conclusions of the dawn of everything is that human society, which had been assumed to be entirely driven by, and human history, by males, and males were running the show, that's pretty much wrong. And many societies were led by females. Females had a huge role in how societies developed and changed and so on. With sperm whales, we do it the other way around. I'd always assumed everything was through females. Males were pretty much irrelevant, except a bit of sperm here and there. And maybe I'm wrong, so I need to broaden my perspective. So, well, now I'm really going out on a limb, but Roger wouldn't mind that, I don't think. And what about the implications the other way around? The fact that these two creatures have these huge, large-scale societies. What does that tell us about human society and history? Well, I think what it does, maybe, is it does support some hypotheses for why that happened. Things which both sperm whales and humans have, like huge brains, like culture, like cooperative behavior, like mobility, and perhaps doesn't support other hypotheses that the important things are tools or fire, which only, or maybe eating squid, which only one of the species had. Well, thanks for listening to me, and we've got so much to learn about these fine and splendid creatures. And Roger started us thinking that way and got us thinking that way, and we need to remember some of the lessons we get from him as we go forward. Thank you.